The nerdy Helisimmer.
Hey guys, it's the nerdy Helisimmer with another helicopter review for MSFS. It's the Bell 206 Jet Ranger by Flyinside, which was released via their website 2 days ago. Now check this out. Not only are you watching video number 50 on my channel, I also started this channel exactly 1 year ago with a review on Cohensim's Bell 206 for X-Plane 11. So a big sincere thank you to all of you who followed me this far, and of course to all of you who are new to the channel. Feel free to subscribe and leave a comment. Now, Flyinside has been around for quite some time. I believe they developed their own flight simulators specializing in virtual reality, but they also produce several flight simulation add-ons. One of which was a helicopter, the Bell 47 G2, which was released, I think, 1.5 years ago as the first payware helicopter for MSFS. And since MSFS was not supporting helicopters at that time, Flyinside developed their own plugin to simulate realistic helicopter flight dynamics. Funnily enough, now that MSFS has its own native helicopter flight model, still Flyinside decided to use their own plugin to give us what they call a revolutionary and realistic flight model developed and tested by an experienced 206 pilot. Let's check it out. As you can see, I'm displaying my frame rates today. I'm going to tell you why later. First, let's check for animations. As I raise the collective, the rotor blades collectively change pitch, and we can also see the swash plate moving when I move my cyclic. A very nice feature is that we can actually open the inspection hatches to take a look at the turbine or engine components. Almost everything in and around this aircraft is clickable. That's a very nice thing. We can also open the doors, and we can also open the baggage compartment in the back. Now, there's one thing you need to know. There's actually no mention of how to do this in the manual. Now, you actually have to move the camera outside of the aircraft from within the cockpit menu for these click spots to show up. So it doesn't work in external view. Now, I clumsily move the camera over to the nose of the aircraft because we can actually take a look at the battery compartment. Now have a listen to this custom sound. Has a lot of reverb, probably recorded within a hangar. As we climb into the aircraft, I'm going to show you the Flyinside Heli Manager that unfortunately needs to run along with MSFS. It lets you choose your own difficulty setting and adjust your hardware. It notifies you of updates, but I think it's also there for copyright protection, so for authentication. Me personally, I'm not too fond of that kind of solution, but that's the way they chose to do it. So let's stick with the realistic setting and start her up. The interior design looks quite authentic. Maybe it looks a little plasticky here and there, but then again, that's true for the real 206 as well as other aircraft within MSFS. Now, the main panel looks pretty much factory new. I would have liked some wear and tear, sort of a used look. The V&E play cards are there, but you cannot actually make out the numbers, so that's not very helpful. You have a lot of navigational equipment for a Jet Ranger, including a GPS. Again, what I like about this model is that almost everything is clickable. You can open the sliding windows, the doors, etc. Turning around, you will find your standard headset. Now here comes my favorite part, which is the overhead panel. We have green windows for protection from sunlight. And if we get a little closer, we can see that all the circuit breakers are actually clickable and functional. Now with engine out, I don't want to put too much load on the batteries, so I'm pulling the GPS circuit breaker. In this model, all radios seem to be hotwired to that circuit breaker, so this is basically your avionics master switch. Rotor brake off and battery on. Low RPM horn comes on, and let's check the caution lights for functionality. Now there is a mute switch on the main panel that you can use to silence the horn. Older 206s did not have that switch, so pilots used to pull the caution light circuit breaker, which would silence the horn but also kill all the caution lights. Before takeoff, you would have to reactivate that circuit breaker, of course. Fortunately enough, we have that silence button, so let's use it. Over here, I would expect to find the TOT light test switch, allowing you to test the light that would actually come on if you messed with the engine. Now here, this switch apparently is used to display the radio frequencies higher in your field of view, pretty much where the caution light panel is. Not the way you would find it in a real aircraft, but rather made for your convenience. Let's do the controls check, make sure that the fuel valve is closed and the hydraulics are on. Paddles, cyclic, and collective. Check for full travel with no obstructions. Same goes for the throttle, actually. Regarding the throttle, if you roll on the throttle, the idle release latch activates. However, if you roll it off, it automatically unlatches. The single purpose of the idle release latch is to stop you from accidentally rolling off the throttle, killing the engine in flight. So it makes absolutely no sense that it would automatically come off. You cannot click it, you cannot assign it to anything. Seems to just be an animation issue, so you do not really choke the engine in-game if you roll throttle off. However, it's still weird. Anti-collision lights to on, and the fuel boost pump circuit breakers in. You can hear the fuel pumps working already. Now I'm going to push the starter, and once the gas producer is at 15%, I'm going to introduce just a little bit of fuel by rolling on the throttle. But be very careful to not over-temp the engine. A lot of individual sounds, so the sound set is all in all very good. But just a tiny increment of throttle. Keep a close look at that TOT gauge. Needle in the yellow band for a short time, but all within the limits. Should the needle rise beyond the yellow band, you should abort startup to prevent the engine from overheating. Once the gas producer is at 58 to 60%, we can let go of the starter. You see the engine outlight coming off once the engine is self-sustaining. Now we have a 1-minute warm-up. Time to set the altimeter. In Flyinside B47, the altimeter gave out wrong readings, at least in the XP11 version. I don't know if they fixed that yet. However, if you enter field elevation, you should be good. After the warm-up, we're going to roll on the throttle slowly until the gas producer reaches 70% and then activate our generator. Once the generator has taken over supplying us with electrical power, we can switch on all the electrical equipment that we need. Also be using Pyto heating today. It's quite cold, and the gyro switch should be forward, yes, so that our artificial horizon does work. Now let's make sure that all circuit breakers are in, and that also goes for our GPS breaker, and now all our radios are coming back to life. So here's that added feature that Flyinside gave you. By clicking on the TOT light test switch, you can read your radio frequencies high up on your instrument panel there. Now I'm slowly rolling on throttle, keeping torque below 40%. Actually, let's do a needle split test. Rolling off throttle, the smaller needle, which is the rotor RPM, should split from the larger needle, which is the engine RPM, showing us that the freewheeling unit works. Important for auto rotation. Now rolling on the throttle again, making sure not to exceed 40% on the torque gauge. Third instrument from the left top column. Having a little trouble with this GPS here. Doesn't seem to respond. Well, I don't need it anyway. Once the RPM have stabilized around 100%, we're going to test the governor for correct operation. You can use the increase and decrease switch on the collective to increase RPMs or decrease RPMs within a within the range of the green band, actually, and that's what we're gonna check for. Make sure to set it back to 100%, and then we're ready to take our first flight. Anticipating a little bit of left power pedal, slowly increasing collective. At some point the helicopter should become light on its skids, and that's the time that you should reposition your cyclic for a level liftoff if necessary. There it go. Whoa. Whoa. Alright, what the... Oh, the hydraulics off. Right, maybe you can see it that the helicopter is very slow to react to my cyclic inputs. So there is quite a big lag between my cyclic inputs and the reactions of the helicopter, which makes it very, very hard to control. See me over-controlling quite a bit. Now this is not the way I expected a 206 to handle. Startup procedure was actually pretty cool, but something ain't right here. I do have low frame rates, on average below 20 frames per second, which is not that good. This might be an issue here. Especially on the roll axis, the helicopter seems to build up quite a lot of inertia for such a lightweight helicopter. But I guess that the main problem is a huge delay from my control inputs to the reactions of the helicopter. Let's try to set it down gently, but honestly this is a mess. Alright, this was my first flight, as you can see, not as expected. But I did some investigating, and I'm going to tell you what I found out. Now, after checking back with the guys from Flyinside, they are very quick to answer any support queries that you might have. It appears that the plugin that Flyinside developed introduces quite a big lag between your control inputs and the reactions of the helicopter if your frame rates drop below 25 frames per second. That's very bad, albeit important news for those of you who, like me, are using MSFS on an older machine which is not that powerful. I sort of wish that they would give information on minimum hardware requirements at least somewhere on their website, which I didn't find before purchasing. Now I guess it really must be their plugin, because I don't have that problem flying the Cabri or the Bell 407. Anyway, as you can see, to improve frame rates, I'm now dropping my graphics settings to the bare minimum, and we're going to move the flight to a deserted island in the Pacific. Let's see how that goes. Another thing I found out is that under flight model you can actually scroll down here, and if you chose realistic, the cyclic sensitivity is defaulted to 80%. Increasing it to 100 sort of improves things, but still doesn't give me good control of the helicopter. So if you press Control and click on it, you can actually type in a greater value. I'm going to try 150% for now. The helicopter stability is at 5%. Well, we can leave that for now if they think that this is realistic. You can also see that our frame rates have improved now that we're out in the Pacific. I do have my issues with the liftoff phase, but more on that later. Yeah, it's already much better, maybe a little too sensitive now. However, as you can see, I can now counteract the tendencies of the helicopter to move away way in advance and thereby have higher control over the helicopter. I watched a review on YouTube the other day from a guy that was showcasing this helicopter. Greetings from me, it was a great video, very well made. However, he noticed that it was very responsive, and there were a lot of comments saying the same thing. As you can see, my experience is quite the opposite. The helicopter seems to default to being very laggy and unresponsive to my cyclic control inputs. Now this made it almost impossible to control the helicopter for me, and only when I increased cyclic sensitivity it started to feel somewhat like the great helicopter simulations out there. So it is a common misconception that decreasing cyclic sensitivity helps you to control a helicopter. It actually doesn't. The more sensitive the cyclic is, the more minute your control inputs can be, and the better you can counteract the tendencies of this unstable aircraft to drift away. Naturally, the Bell 206 with its two-bladed teetering rotor system would have a more laggy feel to its controls than, say, a MD 500 or even an AS50, but it still should be quite a responsive aircraft that is very easy to fly, very comfortable. We'll do the pendulum test now, nudging the helicopter a little bit forward, expecting the nose to come back up. Sort of does. We don't need to be too active on the pedals, or pedal. Still seems to be prone to build up a huge amount of inertia laterally compared to the longitudinal axis, which means that the helicopter tends to break away to the sides more than it tends to break away forward or aft. Another pendulum effect test. This time it's a little more pronounced. I don't know if you can see it in this video, but a nice thing they also animated is the famous 2 per revolution vibrations that the two-bladed teetering rotor systems of the Bell helicopter type tend to produce. Doing a pirouette here. Helicopter doesn't want to turn left, which is accurate. Still, it's very easy to get into POIs on the roll axis. Now, this didn't turn out to be one of my standard reviews, where I would do the usual stuff. There was actually quite a lot of fixing needed to get it to fly correctly in the first place. Of course, I cannot blame the developer for my outdated system. So if you got the more up-to-date hardware, you will not run into this problem. However, you might try around with your cyclic sensitivity settings if you find the helicopter hard to control. Now I'm going to test the simulation for torque-induced yaw. I'm going to climb a bit and then I will lower the collective while keeping the pedal in its current position. The helicopter's nose should then start to spin to the left. It does, and we can also see they have simulated vortex ring stead, the helicopter dropping into its own rotor downwash. Doesn't seem to do it much harm though. I'm going to change the cyclic sensitivity back to 130%. Oh, by the way, I'm using full-size controls if you wondered about that. You might find 100% working well if you use a smaller desktop-sized joystick. I find the weird thing about the liftoff is that it happens so suddenly. It's not a gradual process of the helicopter lifting up into the air. It sort of jumps, as you can see here. So if at that time your cyclic is not in the correct position, the helicopter will either lunge forward or climb backwards, as it did just then. Usually I would correct my cyclic position to find a hovering sweet spot during the time that the helicopter is light on its skids. The Flyinside Bell 206, however, does not give me any indication of where I am on the pitch axis until it is too late. Alright, nose forward, raise collective, and let's get up into the whoa. Pretty much flies straight into the ground. Where is ETL? Should that be it at 80 knots? You can hear an occasional blade slap sound come in, so the sound overall is pretty good. However, the flight model doesn't really convince me so far. In cruise flight, it sort of feels like the Mi-8 of DCS if you turn the SAS off, oscillating quite heavily on the pitch axis. Engine power seems about right. I'm going to raise the collective for max continuous power, which is 85%. It shouldn't let us fly faster than 100 to 105 knots. Oh yes, and one more thing. Now for a slope takeoff, we would have to balance the helicopter on the front of its skids for a level takeoff. We would push the cyclic forward and raise the collective, and the tail should rise, bringing the rotor disc level to the horizon. However, with this Bell 206, you can see that once I raise collective, it actually slides backwards down the hill or the slope. And even if I push the cyclic all the way forward, you can see that nothing actually happens on the pitch axis of the helicopter. Again, there doesn't seem to be a gradual liftoff. The helicopter simply jumps into the air once you pull enough collective. So that makes it pretty much impossible to maintain contact with the ground with any part of the skid, as you would need to do it for a sloped takeoff or landing. For the touchdown phase, that means that we also cannot really feel for the ground with the left skid. And once we've touched the ground with the left skid, keep the helicopter balanced and then slowly reduce collective for a nice and gentle touchdown. Feel free to visit my channel and check out the video I made on the Flyinside Bell 47 for X-plane. You will hear me complain about the very same thing. I found it rather hard to set the aircraft down gently, which after all is a very easy thing to do with X-plane's native helicopters. So I'm guessing that it is the plugin by Flyinside that does not treat the liftoff or touchdown of the aircraft as a gradual process, but more like an on-off situation, if you know what I mean. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but this certainly seems quite unrealistic. I'm not going to bother doing an auto rotation today. I'm going to sum it up here. The looks are great, the sound is good, and the startup procedure is very accurate. However, the flight dynamics did not really convince me. I had to spend quite some time to make it work in the first place, and to be honest, to me it's not very pleasant to fly. To me, it certainly does not feel revolutionary, as they stated on their website. I think helicopters in MSFS generally still have some ways to go to be able to compete with other helicopter simulations. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know what you think about Flyinside's Bell 206. If you find it hard to control, just play around with the cyclic sensitivity settings and make sure that you have a decent frame rate. If your system can run the game at 30 to 60 frames per second on average, you will have no problem whatsoever using this add-on. I've been giving some suggestions to the Flyinside team. Let's see what they make of it. In general, my experience is that they are very good with customer support. They are very quick to answer any queries that you might have. They are also quick with fixes. This is the second update of the initial release, so there were 2 updates in 3 days, which certainly is a testament for their passion to create good helicopter flight simulations, but might also indicate that the release was a little rushed. Remember, they announced the release of the helicopter for the 23rd of December, I think so, for today actually, then decided to release it on the 20th. And did you know that Joshua from Coinsim actually announced that he would port over his Bell 206 from X-Plane 11 to MSFS around Christmas time? Maybe those 2 facts are related, I don't know. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this rather chaotic review of the Flyinside Bell 206, and I wish you all a very happy Christmas and great New Year 2023. See ya!